G'day fans, brothers of the beat, boys, girls and everything in between. 2001 beats. This is the second of the series. It was a thing, but back in the 90s and 80s, we used to write directly onto our media, and that made it more cool. Well, that made it more street, whatever you want. I was also heavily involved in the graffiti scene till I was 26 years old, which is when I really started taking music a lot more seriously. Anyway, 2001, 22 years ago, let's have a listen. It says beats. So again, beats are not songs. Beats are like loops. So you could do a 4-bar loop and you could rap over it, and you could do a chorus, and then you could do a verse, and then you could do another chorus. It's still not really a song until there's a difference between, or a distinction between the chorus and the verse. If you just a straight drum beat from start to finish, you couldn't really say you wrote a song. You wrote a drum beat, or you wrote a drum loop, or you just grabbed a loop from somewhere else and looped it, which is perfectly legit for starting, but it's not necessarily going to be a finished product, because a song requires instrumentation, differentiation between choruses and verses, a hook, whatever you like, breakdowns and things. Those sorts of things don't necessarily happen when you just listen to a loop. Take that as a lesson. As I said in the last video, 4-bar loops always got me stuck in a rut. Working with 4 bars, I always got stuck because it's a loop that goes around. It might be the best loop you ever had, but it just goes around and around and around, hence the title. 8-bar loops, on the other hand, I found are very versatile. And doubling an 8-bar loop creates a whole 16 bars, which is a full verse or chorus. So you only have to double it once. You only have to repeat yourself once to finish that verse. Whereas if you're only doing it in a single bar, you're going to have to repeat yourself over and over and over and over for 16 bars, and you've repeated yourself 16 times. I forget which hip-hop artist I'm always talking about, but I'm always talking about this hip-hop artist. There's a particular person, Tyler the Creator, possibly, where he will have a sound come out one time in the whole loop. So there might be like a guitar just going blink or something or other, but you might only hear it one time in the verse or one time in the chorus. And that's a very good way to make your instruments distinguished. I think the randomness and the surprise element that you should be getting between the contrast between the verses and choruses, the backbone of good songwriting. And when you have 8-bar loops, I find it's easier to start mixing and matching and creating songs from 8 bars than it is from 4 bars. If you're trying to just use 1 bar or 2 bars, like some dance people do, like trance and stuff like that, go for it. But the whole point of trance is it should be repetitive. Check this. All right, Oldschool Johnny on the mix. This is from 22 years ago. Don't judge me, love me. I've got a little bit of coffee. And 20 tracks to go through. I'll probably skim through a few of these. I don't believe any of these were released. But I did start my account with APRA, the Australian Performing Rights Association, I think in 1997 or 1998. So who knows? Maybe there's something on here I'm familiar with. Track 1, Camouflage. Okay. Yeah. Should have checked the levels before I started this. Whew. Can you hear that? That's just drum and bass. We're already in drum and bass territory. I thought it would be more hip hop. That sub is overwhelming. Unfortunately, trying to play something like this on a big system might actually sound terrible. The sub is huge, the sub is big, the sub is overwhelming. We'll play a little bit more, but I don't like the sound of the mix. I believe I was using an MC303 from, oh no, 505 from Roland at this point. So I probably wrote this whole track on a Roland MC505. I apologize for how bass heavy it is. I probably couldn't hear the bass because I probably didn't have studio monitors. I probably had hi-fi monitors at home. And that means that the mix came out, I couldn't hear the bass while I was mixing. So by the time you overcompensate by putting more bass into the mix, you go to another system and listen to it, like mine right now, have studio monitors. It's not that pleasant to listen to because the bass is overwhelming and it's obviously too much. I didn't know anything about shelves or subtractive EQ, so things could be a little bit over the top. Heart Murmur. I wonder how many of these songs, they might all be drum and bass by this point. It's not terrible. It's funny because I was listening to these other mini discs that have recorded from Butterbeats, and what struck me most about this drum and bass from 20 years ago was literally it was like drum and bass, and I remember thinking, is it just drum and bass? Because I'm sure there's synthesizers in there and stuff. And the funny thing is, even listening back, it is mostly drum and bass. That sounds ignorant. It sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about. But compared to the kind of music I'm making now, where I have layers of synthesizers, drum and bass sounds very minimal. Obviously, the drums weren't mixed very well, as you could hear that the hats were so high. But you could almost hear I was following what I would call the drum and bass tradition. The tradition is where, like, say, the intro is some kind of unusual loop or something a bit twisted, a bit strange, that kind of loops and loops and loops. And then you add a kick, and then you add a snare, and then you add hats, and then later on you add like another layer of drum, so it really rolls out as you change the bass line. It's what I would almost call traditional drum and bass. I'll listen to there are many tracks on here, so I don't want to spend too long. This song is called Bass Core, March 2001. March 2001. Bass Core. Long intros. Arpeggio. I loved feedback. I'm sure it's going somewhere. I'm sure it is. Here's the intro. 1 minute 15. Bloody hell. Amen. That one's pretty good, actually. 1 minute 15 into the long stupid ass intro, it rolls in with an amen break. So I'm very happy with that one, actually. It sounds like drum and bass used to sound like. Again, though, I should roll off the very, very bottom of that bass. I should go from 20 hertz under and just roll it off. Because under 20 hertz, it's not real necessary to try to reproduce 5 or 10 hertz from that giant sound system in the club. Not necessary. Plus, it uses more power to run bass than it uses to run treble. So you're actually saving energy by shaving the very bottom off of the bass, and then you can actually push the speakers harder because there's not so much electricity going down to the bottom of it. I know that sounds weird. Write a comment if you think I'm odd. But shaving off from about 20 hertz down, it doesn't have to be steep. You could just roll it off from 20 hertz. That's the audible range for humans anyway. Anything under that, the speakers will be reproducing just by physically heaving in the club. If we're not talking about physically heaving in the club, we don't need this. We don't need all the way down to 5 and 10 hertz being pushed out of your home speakers. It might just muddy up the whole thing and make it sound kind of like mud, right? Of course, like mud. What the hell? Need you 210 beats per minute? 210? No. 105.
Oh, honey, you make me feel good inside. You just feeling me with desire. Come on, baby. Come on, light my fire. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. Oh! Feels so good, man. Just stay right there. Just stay right there. Just stay right there. Baby, you got it. Baby.
Whoa, that was too much. I guess I liked the idea of drum and bass being loud and in your face, but that was not music to my ears. That was just loud and noisy. Again, you can hear the Roland MC505 drum machine sampler thingy. I think it was just a drum machine synthesizer. It had faders and stuff on it and sequencer and whatnot. Most of the instrumental comes from there, unless you hear like a oscillator, or maybe some vocal samples or some sort of chops, because I also had a little sampler on my mixer which all this stuff went through. Live drums, or drums that were sampled. I did have a live drummer for all of my gigs when I played drum and bass. I always had a live drummer, usually the same one, not always. Jason Bell, I don't know if we're allowed to name names, he's a drummer. Jason Bell, the drummer, which I hope he is still a drummer, because if he's not, that'd be a shame of a waste of some good talent there. He's like a jazz-trained drummer, and he's very, very good. Really top guy, really good guy. I've also had other drummers, more rock drummers, but to tell you the truth, Jason Bell was very, very good. There was another guy from the USA whose name eludes me, but it was a black fella from Ohio, and he was a really good jazz drummer too. And somehow jazz drumming and the amen break go hand in hand. Maybe by the time we're done here, you will like me a little bit less for putting you through some of this very poorly mixed drum and bass. But as I said earlier, if you would have heard these songs, you would have heard them live, and you would have heard them with a live drummer on top of the synth drums, and the whole environment is different when you're playing live music. I have no idea. This may be very interesting.
Hi Johnny, this is Emily's friend Emily. We want to come around to the Savo with beers at like 4:30 or so, but anyways, Emily wants you to call her mobile because she couldn't be bothered going to a phone. Not that you're even there. Okay, bye.
Yeah, that was a phone message of some kind. Sounds a bit nicer. Till the bass kicks in, which will be in a minute. Can you believe I was so childish, thinking people want to wait a minute for the bass to drop? 15 seconds. 15 seconds. 30 max. It's 30 seconds. It started promising. The drums this time around were nice and clean. Every time the bass is over the top, and even when at gigs people would come and say the bass is too loud, we would tell them, you're not on our wavelength. Too loud. Righto, battery ran out, but there's only like 2 songs left to go. The mixes are slightly getting better. I don't know if you noticed, but at the beginning it was a washout. The last few tracks, the drums have been getting crisper or clearer, but the bass is still overwhelming, and the bass has ruined all these mixes, ruined them. I'm not going to try to bring any of these things back to life. It's not worth it. The bass is always over the top. Last track. Where's the bass line? I'm sure there was going to be a bass drop later on. Actually, that wasn't bad. The mixes did progressively get better to the end of that mini disc. The last mix was probably the best one. Actually, there was, I think, number 3 or something was really good. So everything was more balanced. But you can kind of hear in there when a person doesn't know how to make music, instead of being musical, they just interject some random but sort of quirky element to catch your ear and make you think, oh, there's something happening over there. And then every sort of 8 bars or 16 bars, they introduce a new element, or they take another element out, or they introduce like a whole new set of elements like percussion. You can hear it in especially minimal tech or minimal techno, where they literally just sort of drop like a one cowbell hit every 8 bars or something, and then every other 8 bars something else is introduced. Hats are introduced after 16, and then after that the snare, and then the kick, and blah blah blah. That formulaic way of dropping in, this will come first, this will come next, this will come, usually it's kick first. So we'll do the kick first, then we do the snare, then we do the hats, and then we do a crash, and then we go into another drum break. It's so formulaic that I don't think that the audience really wants to hear it. It's cool probably if you're off your face and you could barely handle, like, from one moment to the next, what's going to happen on the dance floor. I don't know. Maybe that's reassuring, or maybe that style of music is really fun to mix into or out of minimal music, so that one is minimal, the other's minimal, together they kind of make one song when you mix them together. I don't do that anymore. Nowadays I really do verse, chorus, break, chorus, outro. I don't bother with long intros. 30 seconds is the absolute maximum before your beat or your bass line should kick in. 30 seconds. 15 seconds is really good too, and if you're really great, then you'll be able to drop your chorus when you start the song. Nowadays songs are shorter, punchier. You got to deliver a lot more in a shorter amount of time. And in a minute and a half, you should have basically the guts of your song already being played. Whereas in these tracks, a minute and a half and the bass line might come in. That's a long time on the dance floor without a bass line. A minute and a half. Damn. Don't do that to people. Make every moment, even the transitions, make all of them worth listening to. That's the lesson I get from listening to my old music, that all the intros are way too long and indulgent, and expecting the audience somehow to want to sit there for a minute and a half before I drop the amen break or before the bass line kicks in is just not really fair. Plus, people might have paid money to come and see you, which means they want to get the maximum. You know, give them something to dance to basically from start to finish, and they'll feel like they had a good night. It's when people are in that lull on, you know, long 16-bar breakdowns, which are also unforgivable, 32-bar breakdowns, I might just have to go to the bar and get a drink. So don't do that. The shorter things are and the closer together they are, the more you're going to hold the attention of the audience, and the more quote-unquote fun the music is going to sound, because there won't be any lulls. There'll be a lot more peaks happening. And, you know, you do it your way. It doesn't matter. I have done 12-minute instrumentals, and even friends of mine said they were punishing to listen to, because after 6 minutes you've already heard it 3 times, realistically. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Oldschool Johnny. I'm learning more every time I listen to one of these tapes. My other 2 discs are actual drum and bass that I used to play live. I might be very happy about it or unhappy about it, but the main thing is I always used to play with a drummer. So these songs and this more bass, local impact, these things always had live drummers accompanying them. So stay tuned for the next reveal. I think it'll be local impact, because I think Impact Bass was my quote-unquote album. Alright, so more bass. Next week, come back and I'll show you what I learnt from listening to my old flatulent bass lines. Forgive me. Boys, girls, and everything in between.
Can you feel it?